Hi everyone, I'm Giovanni, and today with us, prominent trader and YouTuber Erik Crown and CEO at BitBull Capital, Joe DiPasquale, who will be discussing the latest crypto market updates. Hi guys, how are you doing?
Hey Gio, good to be back here. Good to meet you, Joe, and pleasure to be back here, man.
Great to talk with you guys.
Let's talk about the price first. So Bitcoin is currently hovering around the 8,000 benchmark, and the outlook is not looking good according to most analysts. Joe, in a recent interview with Forbes, you identified the key support now at 7,750, which, if it breaks, would potentially cause Bitcoin to go as low as 6,000. Do you still believe so?
I do, Giovanni. Let me show you a quick analysis I did on TradingView. We see that about a week or so ago, we saw 2 weeks ago, we saw the price drop. Then what we see here is Bitcoin trying to break out of this descending triangle. The 7750 line you're talking about is this blue line here. We did see the price kind of rise in the last day, try to break out of this triangle, but instead of being able to really break this resistance line or have this resistance line become a support line and continue to grow, we're seeing the pressure kind of be too much for Bitcoin to break out of. So I do see, yes, my prediction is that the price of Bitcoin will continue to fall down into this descending triangle. And if it breaks 7,500, yes, I do believe that we're in trouble and it could go down to 6,000, to answer your question.
Great. And Erik, how do you see these predictions? Do you agree with this kind of analysis?
Yeah, I think my numbers would be a little bit different. I can share my screen right now, but mostly the same, realistically speaking. To me, the most important area for Bitcoin is this blue moving average right here. That's the 377 exponential moving average, which is very, 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 very important for long-term trend identification. If we do break this, which is a little bit above where Joe was saying, I've at about 7850 region, then I consider this as redistribution right here, and we're getting ready for the next markdown. I'm not sure if I would directly target like 6,000 if we broke that region. I do believe it'd be more appropriate to take it one step at a time. I do believe that we'd probably find a nice little bouncy bounce somewhere in this pocket right here between about 6,900 to 7,100 region, back down from our middle of May lows. In fact, what's really interesting to me is looking at a corollary of Bitcoin in GBTC. We already do see GBTC kind of taking that next leg down. We saw the same consolidation right here at what would be the $8,000 level, and GBTC broke it to the downside already as of a couple days ago. And we actually have seen GBTC precipitate these moves on Bitcoin plenty of times in the past over this last few years. So what does make me think, or what does make me continue to be bearish here, is not only just price action structure, but GBTC showing the kind of way as well. As long as we're below this white moving average, that's a 200 moving average, I'd be looking for continuation essentially. And going back to Bitcoin right here, for myself, the way that I think about it as a trader isn't necessarily that we're 100% going down to this next level. I need to see this level first broken at about let's call it 7,900. I'll say. And I would kind of maintain this as overall more bearish as long as we're below 8,700. That's where all these major moving averages kind of converge right here. That's a 200 simple, that's a 200 exponential moving average, and that's the yellow 20-minute exponential moving average right here, which price action had a pretty awful rejection from it over the weekend, right? So to me, that tells me that the bots and algos within this market are angled to be on the sell side of this equation. And if they are, what this kind of precipitates into is, well, if we take off everything but these two moving averages right here, we're gonna be looking at a death cross between whether you're looking at exponentials or simples. Exponentials are the green 55 and the purple 200. Those are on a collision course as long as we're below about 8,700, putting more and more downwards pressure on price action. That probably happens in the next week and a half if those do cross. And the simples will cross sooner than that. They'll probably cross in the next like week, I'd say, assuming that we do stay below 8,700. So both these things would be pretty damning for long-term price action. And that's when I do think, Bitcoin likely does break down. Does it hit that $6,000 level? I don't really see too many other things in $6,000 level. I think actually if it breaks below about 6,900, I think that will actually be headed significantly further down towards mid to low fives. But at that point, we're kind of splitting hairs because we're realistically looking a lot lower if that were to happen. So I think we're kind of on the same page for that. Absolutely.
So recently, Bloomberg quoted Jeff Dorman, Chief Investment Officer at Arca, who said that with volumes still quite low relatively to this summer, Shorts are incentivized to keep pushing prices lower until they hit resistance. So do you agree with this analysis, and where do you see a possible resistance?
So because Bitcoin is in a general downtrend, we do see people, investors, the sentiment amongst the investors I speak to is more of a short sentiment, depending on the type of investor, of course. So that perpetuates this cycle lower and lower until the people will not stop shorting until there's a bullish sign, right? An event, which we could think of, interest rates dropping more or more trade wars or other things that might be a catalyst. Although in the short term, I think, things like Zuckerberg's testimony to Congress next week is a bearish sign. So what I would be wary of, though, as an investor is a short squeeze, because if Bitcoin does, let's say, as both Erik and I predict, go down to 77.50 or 75, we're going to see a short squeeze, perhaps, people trying to cover their shorts, buying Bitcoin, the price shooting up, and perhaps people getting in trouble because they're not able to cover their shorts or get washed out of their shorts. So, but yes, I do continue to see this trend of shorting until there's bearish news, and bullish news, and that could even be, we see the halvening next year or something else like that. There's a number of reasons that bullish news could happen.
Mm-hmm. Erik?
Yeah, so as far as levels that I'd be watching, assuming that we do break down here, because it's always a probability until we actually do take out that 7850-ish region. I'd be looking at first and foremost 6,800 to 7,000 region as a first potential area. And then I'd be looking at, actually, let me pull up my screen right here. This is going to make a lot more sense with an example. And then I'd be looking actually much lower after that. So the next levels to me also just gained off of the volume profile right here, showing a little bit of activity at the high 6,000 region. Then again, if we pull it out a little bit more, back, after that, realistically, fives and fours is kind of where I'm looking towards. Even then, on a weekly, the major moving average that I'd be looking at down around that region is the 200 exponential moving average right here. That's going to be protecting price action somewhere right around 5,400. But this all again comes into the conversation if those next levels get hit. So I always take it one step at a time as a trader. I am not in any way, shape, or form saying that Bitcoin's definitely going down to 5,000 or anything like that. I think if we take the next leg down, 6,800 to 7,000, you treat it as potential reversal when it happens. See if there's any sort of divergent sign. See if there's any sort of lost momentum. And then if the bounce fails, like we've seen for the last couple months. Then you can start targeting those next levels. So that's what I'd say about that. As far as the director of ARCA's statements, it's a little bit. I'm a little bit unsure of what it sounds like what he's saying. Shorts are going to continue to short until it's not profitable anymore. Which, yeah, I'd agree with. I'd mostly agree with that.
Despite the pullback in price experienced by Bitcoin since last June, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange claims that institutional investors' open interest in their Bitcoin futures remains strong, and it's actually over 60% higher than a year ago. So, Joe, what is the logic institutional investors are following? Are they accumulating on dips?
Well, I have kind of a multi-pronged answer for you. So yes, you're exactly right. Do institutional investors, want value? Do they accumulate on lows? Absolutely. So that's when we see their accumulations. But as Erik was saying, the volume, the volume has been low recently. So even amongst these lows into the 7Ks. So yes, the institutional investors I speak to are accumulating on these dips. That's absolutely happening. Whether it's through GBTC or direct purchases of futures or Bitcoin itself, I still, from the institutions I speak to, see a lot of interest in accumulating Bitcoin at low points. Still, I think we've seen the relatively soft launch of Bakkt and other products, and there's still lower volume in this moment than I think would be a good sign otherwise.
Mm-hmm. And Erik, what do you think about it?
Right. So when he's saying that, it doesn't necessarily imply that those people are buying, right? When we're talking about trading going on, they could be also shorting, they could be also selling. That still counts as a trade. That still counts in the volume metrics. So when he says something like that, it's direction neutral. It doesn't really tell you too much about that, unfortunately. What I can say, though, is about bigger accounts. If I pull up this right here, this was a pretty interesting study done. I want to give credit to this is Glassnode on Twitter. I don't know him personally, but pretty damn cool that he put this out. And this is the amount of Bitcoin addresses holding more than 1,000 Bitcoin in their wallet. So we can effectively say these people are, these are whales in a sense. This is around like 10 million bucks or more. And the number of wallets has been drastically rising, right? Which you would think is a good sign, actually, which it is long-term a good sign. But for the short-term price action, think about it. Big accounts are not going to be accumulating during an uptrend. They're going to be accumulating during the downtrend. That's when they are essentially the people who put in the low. These institutions here, dealing with big amounts of money. And you'll notice that every time that this gets accumulated a lot more, every time that we see a massive dramatic rise in this, that precipitates pretty massive drops, actually, which is, kind of the counterintuitive thing, at the outset. But when you really start to think about it, of course, whales are only going to be accumulating when price action is coming down. That's the whole idea. And they're going to be distributing when price action is going up. So you see during 2016 to 2018 right here, we actually lost a few, of those bigger wallet addresses. So overall, this would suggest that, yes, bigger players are accumulating, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we just stop and reverse from this exact moment right here. I mean, I just want to point my attention back towards this first major splurge in late 2018, which I'm sure everyone probably remembers was during October, November. A lot of people on YouTube talking about this, but just a few days later, Bitcoin got halved. It went from 6,000 to 3,000 essentially, and it wasn't until we saw those walls start to go sideways again where we actually did put in the low. So I would say it's correct, but actually the implications of it are kind of backwards in a sense.
So according to a recent Bloomberg article, Bitcoin is no longer seen as the driving force in the crypto market. The article reports data by alternative data provider Indexica, according to which the Bitcoin drop due to the growing cryptocurrency ecosystem, such as emerging new cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies. Do you agree with this analysis? And why would a growing crypto ecosystem cause Bitcoin's price to drop? Shouldn't it be the opposite?
I guess I'll start. I completely disagree. Bitcoin's dominance this year has grown. It's at 66% of the total crypto market cap. So I don't see any sign of Bitcoin not being the dominant force in crypto. It's recognized by the CFTC and the SEC as a commodity. There's ETF attempts. It's going to continue to be the dominant crypto asset. There's others, So I disagree.
Mm-hmm. Erik?
I'd 100% disagree and 100% agree with Joe here. So I'll share my screen once again. Anyways, to say that the crypto ecosystem is growing would imply that the total market cap would also be expanding as well, going up. What do we see here on the total market cap? Well, first, the presupposition is wrong. We're not growing right now. We're actually coming down. We're having a little bit of a downtrend. Anyways, if we actually look at the index for altcoins, which the exchange FTX has actually put together so nicely for us, we can directly look at altcoins and then kind of compare it to Bitcoin and see what pops up. So I would ask that you go into this with a clear mind, and we'll just pull up the first one. This is the altcoin perp index on a weekly, straight down. Midcoin perp index on a weekly, straight down. Shitcoin perp index on a weekly, straight down. Now, admittedly, there's not enough price action history here, but compare all of these charts, which are pretty much the same, with Bitcoin's price action from the last few weeks, and you can see that there's a stark contrast. So I don't believe that that's correct. I also believe that Bitcoin's, the Bitcoin is the ecosystem, and if Bitcoin does fail, I don't think that bodes well for any cryptocurrency, really. Could things change in the future? Could we see like the next, major technology emerge? Perhaps yes, but I don't think that we've seen it, thus far. And Bitcoin's still kind of the king. And if Bitcoin comes down here, I expect everything else in this market to come down, as much or more.
I completely agree with Erik. And Erik, you reminded me that just the macro sense that people in crypto have is the flight to safety is often, if not to dollars, then to Bitcoin. And so right now, when Erik talks about shitcoins and other things, we've seen just such soft action on the alternative coins. Their prices just generally lowering and lowering and lowering. It was big news this week when Ethereum broke 170, which is such a low for it, and just holistically. So there's Bitcoin is especially amongst the fund managers that I speak to and invest in. They are often going from the alternative coins to Bitcoin, but then holding Bitcoin. They're not short it. They're holding it in this moment.
My general view on altcoins goes something like this. I I don't really care about altcoins to begin with, but there's probably going to be some absolutely phenomenally successful altcoins. Do I know what they are? Nope. I don't really spend my time, looking at them. But there are a few that stand out right now. I think Link actually is been for like the last year and a half. Just I have no idea what this thing does, but just this chart completely stands out from anything else. And there's a few other ones, but realistically, what I'm looking for when looking at alts, when people ask me on like a stream or something like that, is I want to see a chart that's not in like a 2 to 3 year just straight downtrend. If it doesn't look like that, it's probably okay, and it might stand the test of time.
Link is amongst some interesting projects that people like. Its blockchain interoperability, Chainlink. And so people also like projects like, let's say, Polkadot or Cosmos, which ticker is Atom. And the ones that, Erik, you're talking about are some of the darlings amongst those who do altcoins and believe that altcoins will rise again. So that's, I think, why we see Chainlink rising, or Atom has a lot of price movement. It's, again, in the last few months been relatively soft. It was at $5 at one point. Now it's under $2.50, let's say. But those blockchain interoperability projects are really some of the stronger altcoins. And the other things I'd say that people are looking for in altcoins would be maybe some of the exchange tokens like BNB, Binance Coin, and possibly you mentioned Litecoin or other chains with a lot really fast transaction speeds. So Stellar would be one of those.
So you probably heard that the launch of Ton, Telegram's cryptocurrency, which was scheduled for the end of October, will be delayed to April next year because considered not compliant with the US regulations. So Telegram is ready to give back 77% of the money to investors who don't agree with the new deadline. So what does this delay mean for the investors, and what impact is going to have on the launch?
Giovanni, in your question, I sense some, maybe this is bad news for investors. Honestly, I've been bearish on Telegram since early 2018, and quoted as such in many places, just kind of warning people away from the project. It always was an order of magnitude larger than, or much larger than anything we'd seen in crypto. It was the hypiest of hyped ICOs. If I were getting my money back and I had been an investor in Telegram, which I'm not, I would be very happy about it because I am not bullish on its prospects even when it launches. So take the win of getting your money back, I would say. And that's my view on Telegram.
I would agree. It's very noble of them to give back the money that they probably didn't have to. Anyways, yeah, man, I'm right there with you. I think that this kind of sets a precedent for the general space. If you actually are on the radar of the SEC, most of these projects are probably not compliant with FINRA or the SEC or whoever their jurisdiction falls under. So I think the SEC just kind of targeted Telegram because they got so big, as Joe said. But I would expect the same results for any other altcoin any other ICO that did a similar thing in as of the same magnitude. So it kind of tells me that the SEC is not really concerned about all these smaller projects. But if you do get pretty big, they're certainly going to knock on the door, which I think is right, and I think that's it makes a lot of sense realistically.
Mm-hmm. But some people are saying that this delay could actually give an advantage to the investors that can negotiate. No, I mean the point is the idea is that because of the delay, investors can have more time to maybe negotiate a better deal with Telegram regarding the price that they paid. But
if that's their general goal, they will have a chance to do that. Absolutely. I would just argue that it's kind of irrelevant at the end of the day. Whether they get stopped again by the SEC or whether the project just completely flops on its face, as do most altcoin projects. I kind of see it as a blessing in disguise for a lot of those people.
If you just look at, just sometimes we have to extrapolate from crypto into, the real world, even if technology can be considered a real world. Telegram raised billions of dollars, right, on something that doesn't exist. This TON token does not exist.
1.7 billions.
Yes. So if you just extrapolate that to any other company that does exist, let's just say Facebook, when it first raised $1 billion, it was a major company that had major traction. So maybe they can renegotiate. Well, we'll see what the future holds, but I don't think that it'd have to be a pretty low valuation for me to be interested, given that it's not actually a product or a thing yet.
Mm-hmm. So do you share the same opinion, the same kind of negative opinion of Facebook's Libra?
Well, I mean, Libra and Ton are completely different because Libra is a stable coin, first of all, that will be tied to the value of a basket of fiat currencies like the dollar or other major currencies. And its use is mainly for an in-network transaction that Facebook and other companies will be championing. The other stakeholders will be accepting it. So unlike Ton, which is a blockchain project that's not a stable coin, Facebook's Libra will, I think, have mass adoption. And yes, Ton can be used within Telegram to send money and things like we see with almost WeChat. But I think Libra is stable and much more has much more promising industry connections and is doing things in a much different way.
Mm-hmm. Erik, do you agree?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, Libra's trying to go the legal route. They're trying to be the legitimate route, whereas Ton just kind of went forwards with it and said, well, we don't really know what the SEC is going to say, but we'll take your money anyways. So Libra is very interesting to me because I do think that Libra's success actually does help Bitcoin. I know a lot of people are going to really hate that statement, but let me explain. This last run that we saw at the upside, a lot of it was kind of in line with just the optimism around Libra and around all these partners kind of signing on with Libra, of which, of course, a few just left, right? Some big names as well, right? Like Visa and PayPal and a few others. So to me, this is kind of like a pivotal moment for Libra in a sense, because it has the opportunity to make itself anti-fragile. If it survives this, if it survives, having these companies leave it, and still goes forwards and does what it set out to do, or just gains its legitimacy and actually operating. I'd say that's actually a pretty damn strong signal for the whole space, just cryptocurrencies in general, because it takes out one more step from getting, from Libra, which is kind of like a more mainstream, mass adopted thing, I'd imagine, with everyone using Facebook, and allows that money to flow a little bit easier into cryptocurrency, because from what I understand, Libra actually would trade against Bitcoin. At least a few exchanges were looking at listing it from what I've heard.
Mm-hmm. So basically, you see all those supporting companies leaving the project as a positive sign, because the project itself will be acquiring some increasing degree of autonomy from all of them, and it will become more.
It's not a positive thing in and of itself. It's a positive thing if Libra persists and actually can go ahead with what they want to do. If they become successful, that makes them anti-fragile and they're not dependent upon those companies, which I think a lot of people, myself included, would put those companies in pretty high regard. So it'd be very impressive to see Libra succeed in the face of that, which would in turn make me more convicted on the strength of the crypto ecosystem in whole, because it's all going to be connected essentially. And I'm sure most people here, like myself, know once money enters this space, typically it doesn't leave.
Here with us today was Erik Crown, prominent YouTuber and trader, and Joe DiPasquale, CEO at BitBull Capital. Thanks a lot, guys, for participating, and see you next time.
Thank you for having us, Giovanni.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, Giovanni, and an absolute pleasure speaking with you, Joe. This has been amazing, man. So thank you.
I agree, Erik. I'm looking forward to continuing to talk.
Cointelegraph. Like, subscribe, and hodl.